Page 89. I flew a few missions out of Hollandia to different parts of Guinea and several small enemy island strongholds. We were given what they called milk runs to keep us busy. There was not too much resistance left from the Japanese, although we did lose a few planes down in the jungle. As we would go out on missions, it seemed that the bay was filled up with more and more ships. One morning we took off for a mission, and the harbor was loaded with hundreds of ships. The next morning there were only a few. That afternoon we got our orders to move out the next day and be on the beach ready to load up in 12 hours. Philippines. The Philippine invasion had started. We were on the second wave to go in. We loaded our entire group on 2 LSTs, landing crafts, and we were off to Leyte, one of the first of the Philippine Islands to be liberated. Our troopers had been on the island of Leyte for 15 days and had a good piece of the island secure by the time we moved in. The roads were in bad shape. It took all the engineered outfit to keep traffic rolling on the muddy roads, so they couldn't stop to build airstrips. It was up to the Air Corps to build their own strips if they were to fly. Between Japanese nuisance raids and the rain and mud, we had a hard time. There is a picture in the book of bombing some of the shipping of the Japanese. When we finally finished the task of building a strip, we found out that the strip wouldn't hold our planes. The only thing to do was to start over again. I had a special friend that I met at church, Ned Stringham from Vernal, Utah. He was in the 113th Seabees and was in charge of the laundry. Each Sunday after church, I'd go down to the Seabees and eat with them, and they'd have steak and ice cream and all kinds of goodies, because the Navy always ate better than anybody, especially the Seabees, because they had first whack. They'd unload all the boats, and they'd take the good food and pass the other stuff on down the line. I was accused by some of the boys who said that the only reason I went to church on Sunday was so I could go eat with the Seabees and bring home clean sheets to sleep on. I think I was the only guy in the 3rd bomb group that was sleeping in clean sheets each week. I was really living on the fat of the hog. I had a tent mate that was jealous, Joe Honey. When he got mad at me, he'd say, "You damn Mormons." He was a good, strong Catholic. He thought all the Mormons had horns, he said. The only reason you act like you're religious is so you can go get all that good food and clean sheets every week. I thought, well, that's what comes with having all the blessings and fullness of the gospel. The association with other members was a blessing in my life. That and having a beautiful wife whom I wrote a letter to every day were enough to overcome the temptations that were on every side. We had just landed in the Philippines. I was a couple of days before Christmas. Of course, we didn't have our tent set up yet. They had a beautiful beach down where we had landed, and it was just a beautiful sandy beach with breakers coming in. We went swimming, but it really had some strong rip tides that carry you away from the beach instead of into the beach. If you don't pay attention to it, it will start taking you out to sea. I was out there with one of our tent buddies named Clark. He was out there and I saw him flopping his arms around and hollering, "Yeah, Bill, I can't swim. I'm too tired. I can't get back in." And so I started to help him, and he started grabbing on me. And I told him, "Hey, I'll help you, but you've got to let me swim, and you can't fight me." He settled down and then started fighting some more. So I socked him right in the face, as hard as I could sock him. I told him I would help him if he would not hold on to me, something I learned in scouting. He just floated and I swam back in, pulling him. I was really bushed. There were 2 or 3 times I was about ready to give up, and I thought, hey, if I give up, I'll never get home to see my sweetie again, and I just kept pumping. I thought that I had been promised that at times when I need special blessings, that I would grant this special gift of having the extra energies and the strength to perform things that were ordinarily impossible. Once again, I proved the power of the word of wisdom, as I was blessed with the strength to get us both into shore, where a couple of his buddies walked out and pulled him in the rest of the way. He was really done in and fainted in their arms. Nobody seemed to think I might need help. I managed to get to the beach and then collapsed. I didn't think too much about it until the next day when I heard that the guy that waded out to rescue their buddy were awarded the Silver Star for saving his life. The only time it bothered me was when I realized that I had just missed out on 5 points that would get me home earlier. They had a point system. So many points for each month overseas, so many points for each mission, so many points for each battle star, so many points for each medal, and so on. All the guys in my tent were so mad at me because I didn't go in and tell what really happened. Of course, I thought old Clark would go in to the first sergeant and report who had really saved him, but he didn't. I had the opportunity of baptizing one of the men in my outfit that was in the service with me overseas. In the 3rd bomb group, it happened because he noticed that I didn't ever drink coffee at my meals. A man by the name of Gerald Fieldhouse had been stationed at Kearns, Utah, and someone had told him about the word of wisdom. One night he came into my tent. I had been there about a month, and he came in and said, "Hey, are you Mormon, Bodell?" And I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" He said, "Well, I've been watching you, and your actions are different from most of them. I've been watching you in the mess hall, and I noticed you don't drink or smoke, and that you don't cuss. Actually," he said, "you don't cuss a lot, because I'm sorry to say that I might have cursed a little." I took the opportunity to invite him to our little group meeting and activities for the rest of the time we were together. When we parted, he asked if he could stop in Salt Lake City and be baptized by me on his way home. I have often wondered if my way of living might have influenced others when we started sending missionaries out after the war. The area that I received in the South Pacific were all tropical islands. The areas that I served in the South Pacific were all tropical islands. But to my sad disappointment, far from the picture I had seen of paradise, from New Guinea up through the Philippine campaign, it was hot and humid, or rainy and muddy. Our officers understood, so the dress code was somewhat relaxed. It wasn't until Eleanor Roosevelt made a tour of the area and saw the dress standards that they started to make us shape up. and they started sending WACs in to help with the jobs assigned to them. I was lucky to be in a group that always had a four-man tent, except when we moved from island to island. Let me explain a little more of what our camp was like. There was group headquarters, then 4 squadrons in a group. We were in the 3rd bomb group, the 8th squadron. Our group were called the Grim Reapers. It was one of the oldest bomb groups in the service, dating back to World War I. Group headquarters consisted of about 15 tents, and that included the officers and supply tents. There would be a chapel made of a few coconut logs with some tin on the roof and burlap halfway up the walls, and the logs to sit on. Not much to look at, but sure did the trick. The squadron was made up of about 8 to 10 rows of tents, what they called 8-man tents. Most of them had only 4 men in them. Officers were separate from their air crew. Mechanics, armors, service personnel, office help, and cooks, etc. When not flying missions, I had time on my hands, so I took advantage of it to try to make things a little more livable. We were given liquor and cigarette rations that I saved to barter with the Seabees. They unloaded the ships. I would go down where they were unloading ships and trade for the packing crates or dunnage, wood used to pack things in, and build me a wood floor to get up out of the dirt and mud. We were about the only tent that didn't have running water going through it during the rainy season. Then I got me a parachute to line the top of my tent, which made it 25% cooler inside. They had 3 other men in the same tent. Or I had 3 other men in the same tent. They would have been like most of other boys and lived in the mud if it had been up to them. The work in fixing up the tent was worth it to my morale. The other boys did appreciate it too. The only drawback was when the boys would come over to our place and play cards until late at night. I got used to it after a time and would sleep with a pillow over my head. Everyone had a foxhole to jump into when he had nightly visits with the nips, air raid. They were right by your bed, so all you had to do was roll out on into it. Each squadron had a mess hall. We ate out our own mess kits. It was a big open pan with a lid that was divided into 2 compartments. Then everyone had a big canteen cup that held about 2 pints. Everyone did his own dishes. We would scrape them off and dump them in a drum of boiling water, shake them around and around until the food was all off. Then dip them in more boiling water to scald the germs off. The meals were real monotonous. We had bully beef from Australia for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They would bake our bread, but it sure wasn't like Mom made. The village were just stores or business. A few sugar refineries were all we had on the island. The young boys, 13 years old and up, would do our laundry. The flying crews were given a lot of leeway. When I was a corporal, 2 stripes, I had to pull KP, duty, kitchen patrol, latrine duty, and guard duty. But after so many missions, I was given another stripe, sergeant. And then I didn't have to do a lot of those duties, except guard duty. After each mission, we would have to reload our turrets with ammo and clean the guns. When we were near the action, we might do 2 or 3 missions a day. You never wanted to go up without a full load of ammo. The hunting might be real good, and you wouldn't want to miss out because you ran out of ammunition. It was quite a show to go down to the beach and watch the P-38 fighters go up to intercept the Zero fighters that would come over on air raids. Their Zero Japanese planes were a lot faster than our planes and could outmaneuver ours. But American ingenuity was what won the war. Our boys would go up in a team of 4, box the Japanese in by making moves like a box, 2 above him and 2 under him. One of the planes in the upper right-hand corner would make a pass at the Japanese, and as that man made a pass, the other 3 team members would move to their new spots in the box, putting a new man on the top corner to make a new dive until they shot the enemy out of the air. Then they would come over the beach and make a victory roll as they came into land. A victory roll was flying in about 100 feet above ground and rolling the plane twice before landing, sometime proving fatal to the pilots. It was great to see and lifted the morale and gave us a little more, as the Marines called it, esprit de corps. Most of our targets were troop support. The infantry would lob smoke bombs to tell us what area we should work over. Most of the time we would drop parafrags, which were bombs on parachutes about the size of a large pineapple. We would come in on the treetop level and sometimes would catch the palm fronds in the bay door as they closed. The bombs each had a parachute on them that would open when the bomb was dropped. This would hold it long enough for us to be out of the way by the time the bombs hit the ground. We were long gone. When they would explode, they would break up into hundreds of pieces, just like a gun shooting in all directions at the same time. The longest night of my life was when I was on guard duty and the Japanese were dropping suicide troopers at night in our area. However, fate stepped in and saved us. The landing of troops on Mindoro had been made without much opposition, and we were to be shipped there. Then Mindoro. Mindoro was only a stone's throw from Luzon, the main island in the Philippine groups where we were to do most of our work. Our mission took us over all the other islands, large and small, and over Borneo, Formosa, and the China Sea as well. From Mindoro, I saw many more points of historic interest, places that had made their names, to stand along with Valley Forge and others, places like Corregidor, Bataan, and Manila. It seemed strange that I was in the middle of the war trying to kill. My way of living and thinking must have changed some since my youth. That change must have come as a part of my army training, or maybe it was the knowledge that if I didn't get them, they would get me. When the Battle of Bataan and Corregidor was won, we felt great because those were the strongholds of the Japanese. We lost a lot of men, and many were taken prisoners at the first of the war. There were an awful lot of my missions just right on Manila, on the island of Luzon. Any of our targets were important bases. It was very important to get this island back from the Japanese because it was the main base for the enemy. MacArthur had to return so that he could keep his promise. When the Japanese drove him out, he said, "I will return." The invasion of Okinawa was next. We moved up there on the second wave to go in. We never did get really settled because we were too busy flying each day. It was the beginning of the rainy season and mud. It appeared to be more developed than shacks made of tin and palm fronds. We could hit the southern tip of Japan. We could hit Formosa and some of China. I only had one mission over Formosa, but several over the lower island in Japan. It would really stretch the gas problem to hit Japan. We were flying A-20s and A-26s when we went to Okinawa. They still were just two-man crews, but I had more room, a periscope that made it easy and no turret. I could control the guns on top and bottom and shoot in any direction, top, bottom, front, and back. This plane was really a step up. I was within a couple of days of having all my missions complete to go back stateside when the good news came that we had dropped this big bomb that could wipe out the whole city. And then the first atomic bomb, August 6, 1945. U.S. drops atomic bomb on Japanese city of Hiroshima. We were waiting for a native to start we were waiting for a movie to start when we heard all this fire coming from the beach. And boy, the gun started banging and we thought it was an air raid because we'd never heard the yak act like that before. And boy, the old rumors started to spread. The war is over. The war is over. They dropped the big bomb on Japan, and the war is over. Then the news came over the intercom that Japan had just surrendered. And of course, we all figured it was probably another year and a half. We knew that they were starting to mass the troops on Okinawa for the invasion, but we had no idea what was going on. So it was just hard to believe. But I was scheduled for a mission the next morning, and I only had 3 or 4 more missions to go, and I would have been able to come home. It was just too good to believe it was over. But they said to be ready. We were not sure. We were going to fly in the morning. Then about 10:30 that night, they said, no, the missions have been scrubbed. We were not going. The Stars and Stripes, our local newspaper, came out 2 days later with an article on the bomb. It reported of this big atomic bomb that had dropped and how it had destroyed the whole city. It had the equivalent of many million tons of dynamite. Nobody at that time, of course, could even comprehend it. It was rainy weather, and we were all in this big tent that held 24 guys. Everyone had high hopes that we would all be going home soon. Japan announced surrender on August 14th, with formal signing on September the 2nd, 1945. I can't remember just how I did feel when I knew that it was really over. It was hard to believe that there would be no more missions, no more shooting, no more planes falling out of the sky. It was a relief to me to know that I would someday go back home. It might be weeks or months, but I knew that I would get there. And And then Japan's occupation. After another 4 or 5 days, we got word to pack up. We were headed to Japan. They said we had to go up as an occupation force, and the top planner said, let's load up as many personnel as we could put in our planes for number and strength. Then we were headed for Tokyo. It was a real stretch for an A-20 to fly that far, but with the right winds, we would be all right. We got there with lots of luck. Our big problem was locating the field we were supposed to land at. It was called Atsugi Air Base, just next to Yokohama, right across the river from Tokyo. It was a Royal Marine Air Base, but was really a short fighter strip. We had no choice because we had no gas. We landed with about 5 minutes of gas left. There were some planes that had run out of gas as they landed, and by the time that everybody had gotten down, thank goodness there weren't any casualties, but there were about 5 or 6 planes that were piled up on one runway that we landed on. 2 planes couldn't stop fast enough because of the short runways, so they went off and stopped in a rice paddy. One nosed in and the tail went up into the air. The other just stopped in the mud. Needless to say, there were a lot of thankful boys that night. Yokohama and Tokyo are just across the river from each other, but we were out on the Yokohama side, and it was a Marine base, which was supposed to be pretty classy. The compound that we were assigned to was so much better than anything we had for 18 months that we were grateful to be there. The barracks we were assigned to had never been painted. Every second or third barracks had a big hot water tub, no showers. It was the custom for everyone to bathe together. The toilet accommodations, we finally found out, were trenches that ran the length of the room. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in Japan, do as the Japanese do. They had what they called honey dippers that would come and empty the big tubs that collected the sewage and take it out to the fields twice a day. It was used for fertilizer. We got a bunch of Japanese boots and swords and all kinds of stuff. One of my greatest experiences was going to Japan on the first day of occupation and experience the feel of a burned out Tokyo. Our job was to fly around the island and inspect the airplanes on the ground to make sure someone wasn't trying to do anything to the planes. The planes had the props removed so they couldn't fly. We saw a lot of country from the air. We would fly around Mount Fujiyama, the most famous mountain in Japan. We did a lot of sightseeing. We lost our squadron commander, though. He was sightseeing a little too close and piled up on the side of the mountain. There was very little to do, so we had lots of time to see Japan. We decided to go into town and check out Tokyo. All that was left was bombed-out concrete skeletons for buildings. The B-29s with their firebombs had gutted most buildings. It was interesting to me that there was not a lot of debris laying around. Everything was neatly stacked in piles, wood in one pile and concrete in another. When we first went into town, we would see lots of people about a block ahead of us and a block behind us, but all the shops were closed. We knew these people had been fed the same kind of propaganda about us that we had about them. The propaganda had the whole nation thinking we were nothing but killers who had no respect for humanity. They thought Americans were bloodthirsty gangsters. But my mind was soon changed when I saw how they respected their elders. Some of the children started filtering in to see what we were like. They were given the old Universal Peacemaker, Hershey's Tropical Chocolate Bar. And it wasn't long before we were accepted for whom we were. We would pass them out to the kids, and they would dare to venture into our areas. They soon found out the American freedom system was a pretty good way of life. They were out getting candy bars, cigarettes, sugar, and everything else because they had starved to death for years and years. But it took about 6 weeks before the adults started coming out. Then they found out that the old Yankee dollar was sure nice to have. They started bringing out kimonos to sell and barter with you. It's funny how it just took a short time to win them over. The Japanese people soon found out that we were all survivors, or souvenir hunters. So out came the merchandise. I bought a kimono and took it home to Meiji. Sometimes something else that impressed me about the Japanese were the family compound and how they honored the elderly. The patriarchal order was really honored. They lived in family compounds with the patriarch at the head and held in great respect. Some of the things the American GIs did were not what you could be proud of, such as the first time we were there. Some of the 11th Airborne troopers took some trucks over to the local brewery and loaded them up with beer. I guess this proved their propaganda correct in telling them what barbarians we were. When we would thumb a ride into town, the driver of the vehicle would stop, get out, and bow time after time, then step back and let you have the car. Most of the vehicles were old trucks that had been around a good many years. Most were charcoal burners. They had these little stoves in the back. You would start a fire and then wait for the gases in the charcoal to store up. Then start the truck and get going down the road. They would only go about 50 miles per hour. When the peace treaty party finally got ready for the big ceremony, one of the first things that MacArthur did was take all the cars away from the GIs. It was interesting to see how they had prepared for the invasion. We entered a big tunnel and walked for 3 hours, and then turned around and walked back. It went miles after miles of big white spaces like stores. There were many, many small rooms, big enough for 8 or 10 people to sleep in. The brass didn't seem to be in any big hurry to send anyone home because they wanted to show strength. When my time finally came, I guess I had been in Japan about 6 weeks or so. I had 2 or 3 medals, 2 air medals, and a silver star. I picked up a few extra points on those, so it helped me to be one of the first to leave Japan. Of course, they were so busy shipping them in for the first month that they just ran for the Philippines and Okinawa and picked up more soldiers. And they weren't about to ship anyone out of Japan until they had plenty of good occupation forces there. I never felt that I was much of a hero. All I did was serve as all the boys did to preserve the American way of life. Every time I went on a mission, I prayed and prayed hard that I would be blessed to make it home and wouldn't end up in one of those planes that would be shot down in enemy territory, or in a ball of fire because of a tire blowing out as we landed on that metal runway where a spark could set our plane on fire. I thank my Heavenly Father for the protecting care that He showed me, the conditions I was able to enjoy compared to many others, and the letters that kept me going from my sweet wife and great mother. The only real pain I had, except for the infected finger that they thought they might have to cut off, was loneliness for home and my sweet wife. My mother had 4 blue stars hanging on the front window. We were thankful that she never had to add a gold star. The blue star was for someone in the family serving, and the gold star stood for someone killed in action. I had 2 brothers, Floyd and Blaine, in the airborne. One brother, Lyman, was in the Army Engineers. He went into France on D-Day and went clear through to Germany. The other brother, Martel, was at Pearl Harbor as a supervisor in ship repair. Our mom was sure proud of her 5 sons. I was in Japan for 3.5 months. It was a climax to my overseas life, but the biggest thrill I had from the time I left the good old USA was the word that I would come home. The big day finally arrived. I came home on the USS General Sturgis, a troop ship. Boy, I was sure glad to get on that ship. I had so much stuff to carry on that I could hardly carry it up the gangplank. Whatever you could carry on was the limit, but you had to carry it on yourself. I was glad that I joined the Air Force and not the Navy. Going home. The voyage took 2 weeks. It was the best and most appreciated voyage I ever had, and believe me, I don't care if it was my last. I was headed for the shores of America, the land I loved. I came home by way of what they called the Great Northern Route. I had some buddies mail a letter to Maydeen each day from the island so she wouldn't know that I wasn't on my way home. We landed in Tacoma, Washington. First thing they did was take us down, and we could have all the milk you could drink and all the steak you could eat. I can remember how good that cold milk tasted. After 18 months of Aussie beef and spam, just to eat good old American food. It was tremendous. Then, wouldn't you know it, somebody came down with some illness, and they quarantined us again. I was going to try and get home, but when I found out it was going to take me a week, well, who wanted to wait a week to surprise her? I couldn't stand it any longer and called Maydeen on the phone. She told me her Uncle Don had died. So I got the Red Cross furlough to give me an emergency leave to go home for the funeral. It worked. I was only there 2 days and they shipped me out. I was on the train headed for Fort Douglas in Salt Lake City, Utah. I called Blaine when I got to Salt Lake, and he came up to Fort Douglas and picked me up. I walked in and surprised Maydeen, and was she surprised. We stood there looking at each other. We'd been apart 18 months, and we were just like strangers. We didn't know if we were supposed to shake hands or kiss or rub noses or what. That didn't last too long. We soon found out what to do. I was released from the Army 2 or 3 days later to start life all over. I'm glad that I was able to serve my country. I would do it again if I had to. But I'm sure glad I was never called on to do it over. I still think it's a great country that has been on the face of the earth. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud we have the standards and opportunities that we have. I hope that we don't ruin that. I mean the people themselves. Because of the promise that we have, that we can have a promised land here if we don't get so wicked and we wipe ourselves out. All we have to do is keep remembering that the Lord has made special promises to us if we make it a daily part of our life and not just a Sunday ritual. The Lord is the best paymaster that any of us have. None of us can ever pay Him the debt. He is a prompt payer. In fact, He pays you in advance. I think that I have truly been paid in advance. I wouldn't trade anything or any days of my life and the experience that I've had for anyone that I have seen who hasn't got the gospel of Jesus Christ in their life. This is page 98, and it's a chart of the different places that I served, kind of a catalog for my being lazy and not keeping track of it, to bless their hearts that they've put this together. And this is from World War II by James Huggard Bodell. 1943 is where they got the years broken out, and it starts out with 1943. And basic training, February and March at Fresno, California. Pre-cadet pilot training, April and May and June in Reno, Nevada. Cadet pilot training was in July, and we went down to Santa Ana, California. And there I found out I was colorblind, I washed out. I couldn't be a pilot, they said. But they did say you can take your choice of these different items or these different schools. And one was an armament school. That was during August and September, and that was over in Lowry Field in Colorado. And the reason I took that one, I guess, is that I was missing my little sweetie so much and wanted to be as close to her as I could, even though we weren't married. We were just still deeply in love, though, I'll tell you. And then I went to gunnery school, October, November, December, and that was down in Harlingen, Texas. And that was right down on the border between Mexico and USA. And then 1944, I came home on a furlough and got engaged in January on New Year's Eve, Salt Lake City, Utah. Held for reassignment, and that's where before they made up the air crews, they sent you over to Salt Lake City. At that time was the biggest big reassignment institution. Then I got married in January 26, 1944. 5 days later, darn it all, they shipped me out to Columbia, South Carolina. I sent for my sweetheart to join me and get her with me as soon as I could. I was reassigned to Florence, South Carolina. Bus trip to take Maydeen home and to say goodbye to my mother. was next to Savannah, Georgia for assignment for overseas duty. That's where we assigned to our air crews. Pilot and 2 gunners to a crew. To Savannah, Georgia for an assignment for overseas duty. On way to West Coast, we stopped in Salt Lake City. I'd called him and told him I was coming back through. We was going to the west, to the South Pacific. And I called them and told them that we would be coming through Salt Lake City for them. Anybody that wanted to say goodbye should come and see me off there. On way to the West Coast, stopped in Salt Lake. Family members were there to say goodbye. On way to West Coast, stopped in Salt Lake. Family members were there to say goodbye. I'd already read that once. But anyway, Maydeen decided to get on train. And I sat with her in passenger car until Wendover. An officer ordered me back to the military car. We kissed goodbye and Maydeen got off the train and waved until we were out of sight. I was shipped over to, on the way for us to bivouac and what have you. We were assigned to Hamilton Field, which is on the west side of the bay, and I tell you, that was a tough assignment for me. And we shipped out June 25th, 1944. We ended up in Port Moresby, New Guinea, Hollandia, New Guinea, and Leyte, the Philippines. That was one of the first islands that we retook as far as the Philippine Islands, and we really felt like that was we were on our way. So I served as a gunner, and part of my missions was Hollandia, which was it was just kind of a quick service there, because I just shortly after I was assigned to the group there, they moved us on up to Leyte and for the Philippine invasion. And then 1945, I was still gunner, going out on missions every day. Well, see, they wouldn't let us. We had extra gunners because the time we got overseas, they decided they only wanted one gunner rather than wasting a guy, because it was kind of hard to shoot out of the bottom of the plane, especially when we would come in close to 200 miles an hour, and the poor guy, you couldn't see hardly anything that you was shooting at. So they split. They had extra gunners, in other words, and so that worked out pretty good. But that was in Port Moresby to begin with there in New Guinea, and then Hollandia, that was in New Guinea, and then when they moved us out, and after the invasion of Leyte, they wanted to keep us as close to the front line as they could, so our group assignment was we actually made our base in Leyte. In 1945, I was still a gunner. December to June. We had moved to Mindoro, which was closer up to where most of the action was, around in the Philippines. And then the great day is we had just moved us into Okinawa. We was moving up so that we could hit the southern tip of Japan, and so that's where the time was ripe for him to drop the atomic bomb. And of course that was nobody knew anything about it, and we learned an awful lot. And it was the thing of it is that it gave us a chance to save thousands and thousands and thousands of lives, because as we found out when we was moved to Japan itself, that they were really dug in. I tell you, it was a great blessing. Even though I only had 2 more missions to go, well, I was glad it was over. And then I had the opportunity of course, we were there on Okinawa, and they needed as many men as they could when they sent us up for occupation. We didn't know how long we'd be there, but anyway, it was an opportunity that as long as I was over there, I'm glad that I had the opportunity of knowing and seeing a little more of the Japanese nation. I entered Japan on the first day of the occupation, and that I was there August to November. The war ended. I was at 48 missions, which meant in 2 more I'd have had leave to go home for R&R, which meant some time for rest and recuperation. I waited 4 months longer for transportation. And then I was released from Fort Douglas in Salt Lake City on November the 25th, 1943. Now this was I think I tell a little later on the excitement that I had. But anyway.
Page 99, Maydeen, coming home. What a homecoming it was. It took months to bring them home. Of course, not all of them came home. Garth Larson from the stage crew, Jim's cousin, and several members of his ward and others. Apartments were scarce. We lived at the East Cliff Apartments, along with members of both our families. We were like one big, happy family.